Limos, limos,
Get in.
and more limos. I'm Peter Bielagus, and this is Money in the Movies. Hello and welcome to Money in the Movies, a show where we review films based on their financial accuracy. Today's movie is Arbitrage, directed by first-time director Nicholas Jarecki. Jarecki? That's what I'm going with. You can double-checky. The film also stars Richard Gere, Susan Sarandon, and Tim Roth. Okay, first of all, let me say this. Stop everything, change the background, give me the serious background. That's not the serious background. Give me this. That's not the serious background. Who's picking these backgrounds? Give me the... Thank you. Okay, folks, this is a phenomenal movie. Now, granted, we review a lot of great movies on this show. The Dark Knight Rises was a great movie.
It would be extremely painful.
And dare I say, a great review. But you saw The Dark Knight Rises. This movie, Arbitrage, you probably missed. So please check it out and thank me later. This film is about Wall Street big shot Richard Miller, a man at the top of his game. Private jet, big house, limousine, beautiful wife, and great kids. But early in the film, we find out that all is not well. Richard Gere, or Richard Miller, apparently made a rather large investment in a
Copper mine.
And things aren't going as hoped. The money he borrowed to get the deal done is coming due on...
Friday morning, I take my money back.
Added to that, Gere has many other problems, mainly with his mistress. Yeah. I guess he also has problems with his car. All these events come crashing together, and Gere has to confess to his daughter, who is not only the chief financial officer of the company, but also the kind of girl who maybe would like to meet a guy with a web show on money management. Just, go for coffee. I'm flexible, whatever.
It's ridiculous.
Gere must tell his daughter about the poor investment he made in the copper mine. In this phenomenal scene, Gere says,
I made a bad bet, so go check it out. Geological surveys right, friendly government. And to lock it in, you hedge it. And then there's something that I hadn't accounted for.
Through a combination of shrewd business practice, cold-hearted decisions, and dumb luck, Gere manages to remain on top. For our purposes, my future fiancé aside, let's look at the copper mine deal that Richard Gere made. Basically, he bought into a copper mine thinking he could make a ton of money. To help raise cash for his purchase, he hedged his investment by selling some of the copper in advance. Hedging is just the act of reducing an investment's downside by sharing some of the upside. If I bought a $1 lottery ticket, I could hedge that purchase by selling you half of the profits in that lottery ticket for 50 cents. If I win, I have to share the upside with you. But if I lose, you have to share the downside with me. The problem for Richard Gere was that he got burned by something called a variation margin. Gere sold the copper in his copper mine using something called a futures contract. A futures contract is just that. It is a contract to deliver something in the future. Remember, Gere does not have the copper yet. It's still in the ground. So to raise money, he sold a futures contract to deliver the copper at a predetermined price sometime in the future. But things got out of hand because of this thing called variation margin. Okay, now stay with me here. Futures contracts are traded on a futures exchange, which is kind of like a stock market. The futures exchange has certain rules since it acts as the intermediary for all futures contracts. When a seller promises to deliver a certain amount of a certain commodity at a certain price at a certain date in the future, and the buyer agrees to buy at all those terms, then the futures exchange will ask both the buyer and the seller to put up some cash as collateral. In the world of finance, this collateral is called margin. Your account containing this collateral is called your margin account. This isn't rocket science. Suppose you agreed to buy, and I agreed to sell, 100 million ounces of copper at $1 per ounce. The futures exchange would make each of us set up a margin account and we would each be forced to put in about maybe $10 million of our own money in cash. Now, if the price of copper goes up, well, it is attractive for me, the seller, to try to back out of the deal because I could sell it somewhere else at a higher price. So to prevent this, the exchange will move some money out of your margin account and into mine. If the price of copper goes down, well, then it would be attractive for you to back out of the deal because you could buy the copper somewhere else for a lot cheaper. So the futures exchange would take some money out of my margin account and put it into yours to prevent you from running away. These back and forth settlements are done on a daily basis in the futures exchange. Since the collateral moves back and forth from one margin account to another, it's referred to as variation margin. So how did Richard Gere get into trouble? Well, let's stick with our example. The danger is that we are dealing with $100 million worth of copper, but we only had to put up $10 million or about 10% of that price each. Suppose the price of copper goes way up or way down. In that case, there may not be enough money in your account to settle the day's transaction. When the futures exchange asks you for more money because there is not enough money in your margin account, that is called a margin call. What happened to Richard Gere is that because of variation margin, he had to keep putting more and more money into his account. One day, he ran out of money. What's more, political turmoil prevented him from getting the copper out of his copper mine so he could sell it. At that point, he had two options. Number one, let his investment firm go bankrupt, or number two, borrow the money from a friend, secretly put that money into his company, and then sell the whole company before anyone knows what has happened. Could this happen? Absolutely. The futures exchange can be a very risky place because of the trading that is allowed on margin. People can invest above their heads. Lehman Brothers, the hedge fund long-term capital management, the lesser-known MF Global are all examples of companies that got burned by extending themselves a bit too far. And as to fancy accounting, well, most people have heard of WorldCom and Enron. Those are just two examples of companies that did a lot of funny accounting to make things look better than they really were. When you trade investments on margin, it's possible to make a lot of money very quickly. But it's also possible to lose a lot of money very quickly. For this reason, I'm going to give this movie 3 out of $3 signs. I'm Peter Bielagus, and this is Money in the Movies.